It had been 5 years since we broke up, and I ran into my ex-boyfriend at a nightclub. He was dressed expensively, leaning lazily on the sofa, with a charming fiancée by his side. I, on the other hand, was wearing a somewhat risque halter-top bodycon dress and black stockings. My hair was disheveled from drinking. I looked like a sorry clown. Some of his friends recognized me. One of them teased, asking how I didn't end up living the life of a rich lady after leaving Lucas. They egged me on to offer him a drink. Forcing a smile, I bent over to offer Lucas a drink. He gave me a cold glance and said, "Sorry, I never drink with women from nightclubs." "Luna, I heard you married a rich second generation. What's going on? Is there a shortage of hostesses so the boss lady has to step in herself?" The one speaking was Edward, my university alumnus. He deliberately drawled his words full of sarcasm. The private room on the 6th floor was decorated in high-end luxury. Under the dim yellow lights, some people were flirting and singing with girls while others were playing stud poker. The rest of them were looking at me like I was a monkey in a zoo. "Don't pull that long face and say nothing. You were a top student at Peking University back then. People here spend money to have fun." They laughed exaggeratedly. I tried hard to pretend not to care. I moved my lips but no words came out. "Lucas is coming." Hearing this familiar name again after 5 years, I was momentarily dazed. The familiar lazy footsteps from behind approached from afar. My throat felt bitter, and I didn't dare to turn around. I instinctively wanted to leave. I had imagined countless scenarios of meeting him again, but it definitely couldn't be like this. I tried to leave, but Edward blocked my way. "Lucas, you're just in time. Luna is here too." He pushed and shoved me, placing me right under the brightest chandelier, stripping away my last bit of dignity. I didn't look up, and the footsteps behind me suddenly stopped. Lucas didn't say anything, but then a strange yet gentle female voice suddenly rang out. "Luna? Lucas, is she also your classmate?" A thunderclap seemed to explode in my ears. I spun around abruptly and saw a gentle and lovely girl standing beside Lucas. She was wearing a white dress, with long hair and big eyes, and a curious look on her face. I heard people around call her sister-in-law. Lucas let out an and gave me a casual glance. His gaze was so indifferent, as if he was looking at a random passerby. Someone beside him fawned over and said, "Lucas, you and sister-in-law are going to get the marriage certificate soon, right? Congratulations in advance." Lucas leaned lazily on the sofa, looking at his girlfriend with affection. "Tomorrow." These two simple words made me feel as if I had been drenched in ice water on a June night. That I fled in a hurry, rushed into the restroom, and kept applying makeup in front of the mirror. The foundation piled up thick and pale on my oily face, highlighting my eye bags and crow's feet. I was only 27. When I saw Lucas, I understood why Edward deliberately kept me when he saw me today. It wasn't just to mock the former top student of Peking University who had now fallen into the entertainment business, but also to curry favor with Lucas by taking revenge for him. When ex-lovers meet, they always feel intense animosity. Especially since our breakup was so ugly. I stared blankly at the mirror for a long time, and my eyes gradually became misty. I stretched the corners of my mouth, trying to practice a smile. In the end, I just raised my head and pretended nothing had happened, wiping the corner of my eye. Because I saw Lucas in the mirror. He was standing right behind me and said to the mirror indifferently, "Miss Luna, long time no see. Aren't you going to say hello to me?" I turned around to face him. "I don't think it's necessary." He already had a fiancée, and he was getting married tomorrow. Even if I had 1,000 words to say, I could only swallow them back. "Yes, I really want to know how you've been since you left me." Lucas stared at me quietly for a while, his eyes cold. I wanted to leave, but he stepped to the side, his strong arm propping against the wall, blocking my way. My palms were wet with sweat. He stepped closer and closer, pressing me against the wash basin. Lucas asked through gritted teeth, "Luna, after all these years, you seem to be living a carefree life?" Seeing Lucas losing his composure, my heart ached, but for my pitiful self-esteem, I deliberately provoked him. After 5 years, Lucas, you still can't forget your old love for me? Lucas gave me a mocking glance. Do you think you're worthy? His tone was cool and full of meaning. He widened the distance between us again and wiped his clothes with a tissue in disgust. He thought I was dirty, even though I had only touched his clothes. When I returned to the private room, Lucas and his group were about to leave. Lucas, I'm going to the restroom first. Wait for me. That girl went to the restroom. Lucas didn't say anything, just smiled at her affectionately, his eyes lazy. 5 years ago, he used to smile at me like that too. Once we went to eat whole goose hot pot. The soup base was fragrant and mellow. I drank several bowls in a row. Lucas smiled with his eyes curved and quickly called the boss to add more soup. The boss was surprised. Lucas explained, your soup base is so delicious. My wife has drunk several bowls. I felt all the heat rush to my cheeks. I didn't need to look in the mirror to know my face was definitely red. While the boss was adding soup, Lucas leaned over to wipe my greasy mouth. I blushed with shyness and secretly stepped on his foot under the table. He smiled, and his deep eyes were full of affection, warm and bright. After the boss left, I said coquettishly, I'm not your wife yet. Lucas said while ladling soup for me, we'll get the marriage certificate after graduation. I was so shocked by his words that I fell silent. That night, back in the dormitory, I tossed and turned and couldn't help sending him a message. Really? Lucas called me soon. That night, we talked on the phone for a long time, imagining a beautiful life of getting married right after graduation. I said I liked daughters, wanted a study in warm yellow, planned to raise an Alaskan Malamute weighing over 100 pounds, and insisted that there must be a dishwasher in the kitchen. Lucas agreed one by one, saying, I'll listen to my wife. The end of his voice carried a smile, and his voice was clean and gentle, like a feather gently tickling my heart. After that girl went to the restroom, several people who weren't drunk took the opportunity to gossip. I remember at that time, Luna left without saying goodbye. She didn't even come to the graduation ceremony. Lucas leaned lazily on the sofa, his eyes cold. How did the top student end up like this? 10 years of hard study can't compare to 3 generations of business, huh? We haven't seen each other for so many years, Luna. Don't you think you should offer Lucas a drink? How much tip you can earn tonight depends on Lucas's word. Amidst everyone's jeers, Lucas's cold and deep eyes casually swept over me. Lucas, I'd like to offer you a drink. Trying hard to suppress the tremor in my voice, I held the wine glass and stood in front of Lucas, wearing 8-centimeter high-heeled shoes. His eyes only briefly glanced at my low-cut dress, and he didn't even lift his hand. I don't drink with escorts. A huge sense of shame overwhelmed me. I really wanted to explain that I wasn't a prostitute, but I didn't know how to start. For a moment, I could only stand there with the glass in my hand, awkwardly not knowing what to do. The door was pushed open, and the girl in the white dress walked in again. It was September, and the evening weather was already a bit cool. Lucas stood up to tidy her clothes. Unlike his previous silence, he smiled gently and said, let's go. Then their group left in a mighty manner. In our line of work, we need to bow at the door and see the guests off. Lucas and his girlfriend were the last to leave. When they passed by me, his girlfriend accidentally stepped on my foot. Her sharp high heel crushed my foot, and I winced in pain. Tears welled up in my eyes. Why didn't you explain it to him clearly? On the phone, my best friend Aria was indignant. There's no need. He has a girlfriend, no, a fiancé. After they left, I also got off work. There was a drizzle that night. I stood at the entrance of the convenience store, taking shelter from the rain while waiting for my car. There was a pause at the other end of the phone, and Aria said in disbelief, he has a fiancé? Yeah. The street on the rainy day was deserted, looking rather desolate. But you've waited for him for so long and finally met him. You. I interrupted her, Aria, there's no need. No one will always be waiting for you in the same place, especially considering the reason why we broke up. No one will always be waiting for you in the same place. Some words, if not said at that time, will lose their meaning if said later. A flash of lightning suddenly illuminated the clouds, and a thunderclap rumbled. The drizzle suddenly turned into a torrential downpour, and raindrops as big as beans crackled against the window. The cold wind made my eyes ache. After all these years, I tried my best to maintain my so-called dignity, but still, I met him again in this most despicable way. I couldn't afford to live on an ordinary person's salary. It was difficult to get a taxi on a rainy day. The strong wind blew the rain, and in an instant, my clothes were soaked. My phone showed that I was in the queue for a taxi. A silver Porsche slowly drove up and stopped in front of me. It was very dark, and the streetlights were not very bright, but I knew it was Lucas. He was sitting in the car, neither rolling down the window nor honking the horn. He didn't signal for me to get in the car, and I didn't move either. We just stayed silent like this, with the shadow of the Porsche overlapping mine. My mind wandered back to that year. Lucas seldom talked. When we were in love, most of the time, I would say 3 sentences, and he would respond with 1. He had always been a taciturn person. People on the internet say that graduation season is the breakup season. I was confident that my family's financial situation was decent. Although it wasn't a perfect match, at least the gap wasn't huge. I was also confident in my love with Lucas. I said that love could overcome all difficulties. On the eve of graduation, Lucas suddenly told me that there were some issues with his family's company, and his mother asked him to go home. I said, "Be careful on the way." He replied, "Okay." I didn't expect that would be the last sentence we said to each other in these 5 years. Lucas left in the morning, and my father was taken away by the Discipline Inspection Commission in the afternoon. It was also a rainy day. My father was handcuffed in front of me. I chased him downstairs and hugged him tightly, shouting hysterically. My wet hair stuck messily to my face. My father raised his hand and stroked my head, comforting me in a gentle voice as usual. "Sweetheart, Dad is going to cooperate with the police to investigate some issues. You stay at home with Mom. Dad will be back soon." I didn't wait for my father to come back. In just 3 days, he committed suicide. I also didn't wait for Lucas to come back. The day my father was taken away, I called him, but his mother answered the phone. She politely but coldly told me that Lucas was going abroad, and his family had already arranged a marriage for him. She hoped we wouldn't contact each other anymore. I didn't believe it. I went crazy trying to contact him those days. He didn't answer any of my calls or reply to any of my messages. We received the news the day after my father committed suicide. He ended his life in the bathroom with a pair of pants. My father's funeral was held in a hurry. His close colleagues came to offer a bouquet of flowers and said with regret that my father was a good person, but unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong side. My heart ached, but I couldn't cry. My tears had already dried up. My mother's hair turned white overnight. After my father's funeral, my heart felt like a large piece had been ripped out. It was in great pain, empty, and on the verge of death. I still couldn't believe that Lucas would treat me like this. Shivering, I dialed his phone again at 2 a.m. After a long wait, the phone finally got through. A female voice answered the phone sleepily, mumbling in her dream and asking who I was. My pupils shrank slightly, and my hand holding the phone trembled nonstop. I couldn't believe it. The person I trusted the most, the lover I thought would accompany me to the end of my life, was in bed with another woman on the day of my father's funeral. In just 7 days, my life had turned upside down. I sent the last WeChat message, "Let's break up." Still, no one replied to me. The taxi slowly stopped in front of me. The driver rolled down the window of the passenger seat and shouted, "Are you going to Ocean Mansion?" "Yes." I held my handbag over my head and took big strides to run over and open the door. Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm and yanked me hard. I fell off guard into Lucas's arms. He asked, "What are you going there for?" Ocean Mansion was a well-known villa area nearby. The owners were either rich or noble. I struggled to push Lucas away, but he grabbed my wrist in a reverse grip. I winced in pain and looked up to see Lucas's gloomy face. "What does Lucas want to ask?" Lucas's face was ashen. There was a provocative glint in my eyes. Don't you understand the principle that people always strive for a better life, Lucas? The cold wind howled, making my rain-soaked hair messy. You also think the money I earn is dirty, right? I sneered, voicing what was on his mind. 50,000 a month, is that enough? Lucas interrupted me with a cold face. If it's not enough, it's 100,000. What do you mean? Lucas sneered, aren't you short of money? Isn't 100,000 a month enough? Then you name the price, 150,000? 200,000? Finally, I broke free from him and raised my hand to slap him. Lucas's head was turned to the side by my slap. His face quickly swelled and turned red. The taxi driver stuck his head out of the passenger side window, wanting to say something but was glared back by Lucas with a fierce look. You've got quite a strong hand. Lucas pursed his lips and a fierce and excited smile flashed across his face. His face was dark and unclear. After staring at me quietly for 2 seconds, he directly grabbed my hair in a reverse grip and dragged me towards his car. What the hell are you doing, young man? Do you need help, miss? The taxi driver shouted, sticking his head out of the window. Fuck off. Lucas clenched his fists and stared at the driver with a fierce look. The driver mumbled, crazy, and drove away with a roar of the engine. The car sped all the way to the entrance of Ocean Mansion. Eastside, holding my bag. The strap had been torn off during the scuffle just now. Get out. Which building is your sugar daddy's house? Do you need me to drive over there? Lucas's voice was extremely hoarse, and his almond-shaped eyes looked at me mockingly. Lucas, is this interesting? My eyes were indifferent, and my tone was as calm as if I was asking him, what shall we eat tomorrow? We should each go our own way. Don't meddle in my business. Suddenly, Lucas laughed out loud. He hooked the corners of his lips, stared at me, and reached out to pull at my clothes. During the tug-of-war, one of my buttons popped off. Anyway, you're out here to make money. You might as well sell yourself to me. I broke free, didn't say anything, and just slapped him again. He was no longer the Lucas from a few years ago, and I was no longer the innocent and pure Luna. I opened the car door to leave, but Lucas used the same trick and locked my hands again. In desperation, I opened my mouth and bit down. Lucas let go in pain, and I took the opportunity to get out of the car. But I hadn't walked 2 steps when Lucas grabbed my hair from behind. How could he be like a woman after not seeing him for a few years? The rumble of thunder came from the distance. Lucas was dressed in black, almost blending in with the night. His back was straight, and the dim yellow light fell on his face, highlighting his angular features, which were highly aggressive. Let's go. Take me to meet your sugar daddy. I want to get to know him. He smiled playfully. I resisted with all my might, but the strength in his hands only increased. You won't say? Then I'll look from house to house. There was still a smile on his face, but there was an uncontrollable restlessness in his eyes. Whose canary is this? Come out and claim it. Can you transfer it to me, buddy? We can negotiate the price. In the empty residential area, a few lights flickered on. I saw people standing by the windows, craning their necks, and some were holding their phones, filming this absurd and ridiculous scene. I should have been sad, but I felt like laughing, yet I really couldn't make a smiling expression. Those words were like a blunt knife, cutting at my heart bit by bit, making me gasp in pain. Fuck you. Watch your mouth. Arya's voice came from afar, interrupting Lucas's outburst. Arya was so angry that her face was red. She casually picked up a stick nearby and rushed over. You're the one who's selling yourself outside. Shut up if you can't speak human language. Luna was really blind to be with you in those years. The stick lashed out at Lucas again and again. Fortunately, Arya wasn't good at fighting, and I was there to stop her, so Lucas wasn't really hurt. I was afraid he'd make us pay for the damage. Finally, after calming down the furious Arya, Lucas got up from the ground and licked his injured lips. His whole body was soaked, and so was I. I lowered my eyes, not looking at him. I had come to pick Arya up from work and didn't want to entangle with him any longer. She was blind to be with me, so she's looking for a sugar daddy, right? Lucas deliberately drawled his words, full of sarcasm. Fuck off. I finally looked up, stared straight into his eyes, and said each word slowly. When I got home at night, the narrow space was filled with the pungent smell of cooking oil fumes. I opened the curtain, and the person in the bedroom walked out slowly, leaning on the wall. Luna, you're off work? Mom's face was pale, and there were many bloodshot eyes. I didn't pay attention to the time. It's a bit burnt. I put down my bag and went to the kitchen to bring out the dishes, barely making enough space on the cluttered dining table for our mother-daughter meal. Mom, it doesn't matter. I get off work late. You don't have to wait for me to eat in the future. How about I order you takeout? Mom waved her hands repeatedly. Takeout is not clean. It'll give you a stomachache. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something and went to the kitchen to bring out a bowl of noodles that had already clumped together. Today is your father's birthday. He didn't have longevity noodles on his birthday last year. I have to make it up for him today. He was drunk last year. He had no appetite for noodles. I have to stop him from drinking like this. His health won't be able to take it. Sweetheart, go buy a cake for your father. The money is in the bag by the door. Remember to ask the boss for change. Forget it. I'd better go. Will the boss overcharge you because you're a kid? It's quite dangerous for you to cross the road by yourself. She carefully separated the clumped-together noodles, and the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes eased a lot. I picked up the noodles and said, I'll taste it for Dad first. My mom gave me a disgusted look and said, You're so greedy. How can you get married in the future if you, a young girl, are so gluttonous? I made this for your dad. When your dad comes back, I'll tell him that you took the first bite. Forget it. Your dad is a girl-crazy dad. He won't bear to scold you. My mom mumbled, and her hand kept moving as she picked up food for me. I put down my chopsticks and bowls and affectionately hugged my mom's arm just like when I was a kid. Mom is the best. My mom stroked my head and looked down at me, who was snuggling in her arms. Luna, when you grow up, you can't get married far away. Otherwise, your dad and I will be so lonely. Don't worry, Mom. I'll spend every birthday with you guys in the future. My mom nodded and suddenly got up and walked towards the balcony. Oh, Lao Zhang, I don't have time to play mahjong. My Luna is going to take an exam, and I have to supervise her recently. I watched her pretending to be busy with a broken screen mobile phone. It was a broken phone that couldn't be turned on half a year ago. Dad passed away, but his lawsuit wasn't over yet. The management of the company had a reshuffle. Dad had chosen the wrong side. The new leader intended to cultivate his own people and tricked Dad into signing the project contract liability statement. Sure enough, a major safety accident occurred in that project, and a 10-year prison sentence seemed inevitable. After the accident, our family ran around, but no lawyer was willing to take on this hot potato case. Dad was devastated and died in tears. Finally, although we spent a large sum of money hiring a lawyer to find out the truth, the compensation was enough to drag our family into hell. Our family was fined a large amount of money. These hard years had turned my mom, a middle-aged woman in her early 50s, into an old lady. After dinner, the rain had stopped, and I took her downstairs for a walk. There was a night market street near the community, and across the road was a 5-star hotel. The messy and bustling night market and the expensive and glamorous star-rated hotel. Just separated by a road, but it seemed like a galaxy apart. I bought a roasted sweet potato for my mom. Just after paying, I turned around and she was gone. I held the hot sweet potato, forgetting that it had just come out of the oven. I was so scared that cold sweat broke out. I shouted loudly and was even about to call the police. The shouts and curses of a group of people came from across the road. I ran straight over there. Several security guards were yelling at a woman sitting on the ground. I rushed up and pushed them away, saying, "One more word and I'll call the police." A young man dressed expensively beside them laughed and said, "Coincidentally, we've called the police too." This old woman suddenly ran over, grabbed my girlfriend's bag and tried to run away. I asked the security guards to pull her away, but she just wouldn't stop. As he spoke, he snatched the bag from my mom's hand and examined it carefully. "Since you're here, pay for it." I took a look. It was a Hermes Birkin. My mom used to have one just like it. Later, when my dad had an accident, that bag was auctioned off by the court. Although there were only 2 nail scratches, this bag was extremely expensive. I apologize to you on behalf of my mom. I'll give you an address. I calmed down, found a pen and paper, and said, I'll pay after it's repaired. The other person laughed again. Do you know how much this bag costs? Just giving me an address casually. Is it some shabby tailor? Won't you replace my Hermes with a fake one? I lowered my head and wrote my phone number on the paper and gave it to him. The other person glanced at the address and phone number on the note and sized me up. The owner of that store was a friend of Lucas's. I was introduced to him before. He was quite famous. Almost all the wealthy and noble people in this city knew him. The young man's girlfriend sneered, You're really muddle-headed. Do they look like they know President Chen? I think they're just beggars trying to extort money. I stared at her and said coldly, Can you speak decently? The woman's voice suddenly got louder. What? Your old hag started the extortion, and we can't even say anything. Her friends heard this and gathered around again. The atmosphere became tense in an instant. Beep. Someone honked the car horn. Probably because we were blocking the hotel entrance. I helped my mom up and moved aside a little. A silver-gray Porsche steadily stopped between the 2 groups of us. The car window rolled down, and Lucas's hand stretched out of the window. He skillfully flicked the ash a few times. He glanced at me, his eyes full of mischief. Why was he here? The people who had quarreled with me obviously knew Lucas. He bent down and greeted him. Mr. Lucas, you're here today too? Lucas exhaled a puff of smoke and asked, What's going on? Mr. Lucas, these are just 2 scoundrels. I didn't ask you. Lucas glared at the man, and his gaze turned to me. What happened again in just a short while I didn't see? His eyes were calm, but his tone was full of frivolity. It has nothing to do with you. I patted the dust off my mom's clothes and replied angrily. Xiaolu, I know this girl. If you 2 have any disputes, you can go to Zhang Hao to solve it. I'll take responsibility. Zhang Hao was Lucas's secretary. Thank you, but no need. We're not familiar. I really didn't want to entangle with him over these meaningless issues and took out my phone, ready to pay directly. Lucas looked at me sideways and said, Not familiar? Then how did the button of your clothes come off just now? My face turned bright red, but my mom was full of interest and directly got into Lucas's car. I was about to pull my mom back when the young man across the street suddenly spoke. Since she's a friend of Mr. Lucas, she's also my friend. Let's forget about this matter. My current life already made me feel ashamed in front of him. I didn't want to owe him any more favors in this kind of situation. I was determined to pay, but they had to apologize. The girl snorted and rolled her eyes. Lucas waved his hand and said, One thing is one thing. Pay if you should pay, and apologize if you should apologize. His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for everyone to hear. I didn't know why he was helping me, but the other party did apologize. After the apology, I planned to take my mom home. Suddenly, Lucas got out of the car and grabbed my arm. Don't go home yet. I'll take you and Auntie for a drive. I didn't have time to refuse because my mom was already cheering and bouncing to open the car door. I held my mom's hand and sat in the back seat. My mom's mood unexpectedly calmed down. She listened to the music in the car and tapped her fingers in rhythm. What's wrong with Auntie? Alzheimer's. After a brief silence, Lucas sneered, Luna, you never thought it would come to this, did you? Before I had time to figure out the meaning behind his words, Lucas pulled over and said in a flat tone, Let's make a deal. Be with me, and I can arrange the best doctor to treat Auntie. Coincidentally, there's a professor of psychiatry who has returned from the United States. If you behave well, I might even consider taking care of her until the end of her life. His face was turned away from me as he puffed on a cigarette, looking out of the window. What about your fiancé? That's none of your concern. His tone was as casual as if he was discussing what to eat tomorrow. I wasn't sure if he was just trying to play tricks on me, but I admit that at this moment, I was tempted. If enduring some humiliation could make my mom recover and even lead a happy life in her later years, why wouldn't I be willing? Being a mistress is of course disgusting, but my mom's condition is getting worse day by day. I have no other choice. Anyone can be a sugar daddy. In the face of desire, dignity is the cheapest thing. Lucas took my phone and entered a series of numbers. Moments later, his phone rang. This is the opportunity I'm giving you. You'd better be obedient. I have plenty of ways to deal with you if you misbehave. Lucas disappeared for a few days. He didn't let me go to the karaoke bar anymore and gave me a sum of money. He said he would arrange for my mom to be hospitalized in a few days. Since I had money and time to accompany my mom, I was happy to be at ease and didn't ask too many questions. A few days later, I was watching TV with my mom when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and Lucas was there. After greeting my mom politely, he pulled me into the room. I thought he had something to tell me, but as soon as the door was closed, he sprawled out on the bed. I'm tired. Come here. I was stunned, frozen in place. Not hearing any movement for a long time, Lucas turned his head to look at me. Luna, can't you understand what I'm saying? During those years of our relationship, Lucas and I were not unfamiliar with being intimate. I was easily shy. Every time, we would close the curtains in the middle of the night and turn on the TV to try to drown out the sounds of passion. Back then, he would steal kisses from me, respect me, and hold me in his arms afterwards, saying, "Baby, you've worked hard." That was love back then. But what about now? Now, to put it bluntly, I don't think he sees any difference between me and those women out there who sell themselves. It's just a matter of mutual benefit. I took a deep breath and said, "Can we change to another place? Mom is still outside." Lucas didn't answer, but patted the bed, motioning for me to come over. As soon as I sat down on the edge of the bed, I was pulled into a strong embrace. Lucas clamped my neck with one hand and pinched my mandible with the other, then rolled over and pressed on me. His slightly cold tongue slipped into my mouth, ravaging it nonstop. He didn't make any further moves. The long, deep kiss took a long time to end. I wiped my swollen lips in front of the mirror, while he lay lazily on the bed. "I'll arrange for someone to send Auntie to the hospital tomorrow." I stopped what I was doing and asked, "Aren't you going?" Lucas scoffed, "You're not my wife." He could always break down all my pretended self-esteem with one sentence. My hand involuntarily exerted more force, pressing on the wound he had bitten, and I gasped in pain. "After Auntie is hospitalized, you move to my place." I turned to stare at him. He seemed to see what was on my mind and said, "She's not here. She's gone abroad." I wanted to say that he was already in the wrong for cheating and keeping a mistress, and he shouldn't bring the mistress into the house. Lucas said impatiently, "Just do as I say." He was right. My actions were like those of a prostitute, and I was trying to be a whore and still set up a chastity arch. I was the most hypocritical. When we arrived at the sanatorium, I deliberately looked up at the sign. It was the best sanatorium in our area, and the treatment costs were exorbitantly high. Mom held my hand tightly all the way and said, "Luna, where is this? There's no one we know here. Let's go home, okay?" I didn't answer. Looking at my mom's cautious appearance now, my heart felt like it was weighed down by a huge boulder, and I could hardly breathe from the pain. "How much does this cost? Let's change to a cheaper one. Your dad won't know where to find me." I almost burst into tears. "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry. It's not expensive. I've told Dad the address, and I'll come to see you often, okay?" After settling my mom in, I watched her through the glass for a long time. The attending doctor comforted me, saying that my mom's condition was in the mild stage. As long as the treatment went smoothly, she could be discharged from the hospital in a few months. I secretly made a decision in my heart that after my mom was discharged, I would take her to move and live in another place. We would never come back here. When I walked out of the gate, I was surprised to find Lucas's car parked on the side of the road. Thinking about it, it made sense. He was a married man, so of course he had to avoid suspicion. I got into the passenger seat and thanked him. Lucas didn't say anything. He was smoking, and the cigarette butt glowed on and off. He threw the cigarette butt out of the window and drove back home at high speed. The days of living together, or more precisely, the days of being his kept woman, weren't as hard as I had imagined. Lucas's house was huge. He was a rich second generation, and he was also good at stock trading and investment in college. Any stock in his hand was worth the lifetime salary of an ordinary person. My room was the second-floor guest room facing southeast. The wallpaper was beige, and the decoration was warm and fresh. The room was fully equipped, and there was even the brand of sanitary napkins I usually used. He said that I was not only his mistress but also his nanny, and I had to take care of his daily life. So the next morning, I was about to go out to buy groceries, but when I opened the door, I found that fresh ingredients had already been delivered to the storage box at the door. After tidying up the ingredients, I made 2 simple sandwiches, hot milk with sugar, and black-peppered grilled sausages. When Lucas got up, his face was sallow, and he looked a bit tired. He just took a sip of the milk and then told me to eat all this breakfast. He said he didn't like it and asked me to make a fried egg. While I was making the fried egg, he went upstairs to change clothes. After the fried egg was done, he didn't even look at it and was about to leave. "I'm going to the company. Eat it all. Don't waste it." I was already quite full from the 2 sandwiches, but I still sat down and ate the fried egg bite by bite. The doorbell rang again. I opened the door, and it was the hourly worker at Lucas's house. Later, I asked him why he didn't let me clean the house. Lucas glanced at me sideways and said, "You're not good at it. I'm afraid you'll break my furniture." But he still ate the food I cooked every day. Sometimes when he came back late from social gatherings, he would ask me to take a taxi to pick him up and be his designated driver. After we got back, he would want to eat a bowl of noodles or wontons I cooked. I said it wouldn't sound good if word got out that he always asked me to pick him up. He turned a deaf ear. On the first night I moved into his house, I heard the sound of the door opening. I walked out and saw Lucas sitting on the sofa with the buttons of his shirt wide open. A woman was sitting on his lap, her arms around his neck, her eyes seductive. He was extremely drunk. Teased by the woman, his eyes were red and his big hands kept kneading the woman's buttocks. Watching their increasingly bold actions, I was about to awkwardly retreat to my room when I accidentally bumped into an ornament nearby, making a clear sound. The woman was startled by me hiding beside the stairs. Lucas glanced at me with hazy drunken eyes, mumbling something. I only clearly heard the last sentence, "Ignore her. Let's go to the room, baby." I had no idea how good Lucas's physical strength was. The woman moaned and screamed all night, and I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. The next morning, seeing the faint hickeys on Lucas's collarbone, I sensibly chose to turn a blind eye. He didn't seem to care about this kind of thing at all. Before leaving, he asked me to clean up his bedroom. The bedroom was filled with the decadent smell of lust. I opened the window to let in some air. The weather was gray, and there was no sign of light. Lucas was like a schizophrenic. Sometimes I really felt that he was good to me, and I could see the distress in his eyes. But whenever I had such a feeling, he would quickly stab me in the heart, constantly reminding me that I was just a pet he kept. And the occasional phone calls from his wife also constantly reminded me that I was just like a mouse stealing oil, destined to be in the dark. I didn't know why he hated me so much. Sometimes I really wanted to ask him. Clearly, he was the one who cheated, used cold violence, and slept with others. Why did he always act like a victim? But when I met the contempt in his eyes, I thought, forget it. Time has passed, and this is how it is. Lucas covered all of my mom's treatment costs. He was in a good mood recently and gave me more and more pocket money. I opened another card and withdrew the money he transferred to me each time and saved it in this card. I had been so poor in the past few years that I wouldn't feel safe unless the money was in my name. I often made a detour to the bank to check the balance in the card while taking a walk. Watching it change from a 5-digit number to a 6-digit and then a 7-digit number. I secretly thought about which city to buy a house in with this money and how much to set aside for my mom's old age care. But I never expected that I was pregnant. Time passed very quickly. On the eve of New Year's Day, Lucas's friend sent over dozens of caddies of mutton. Mom loved roasted lamb chops and mutton dumplings. She was recovering well. The doctor said she could be discharged from the hospital in another 1 or 2 months. I discussed with Lucas about picking her up to stay for a few days during New Year's Day. I made roasted lamb chops, mutton hot pot, and mutton dumplings. Mom was very happy while eating. She ate dumplings one by one, just like a child. When Mom is discharged from the hospital, you two should get married. Mom will take care of the baby for you. Lucas's chopsticks paused for a moment, and he didn't say anything. I didn't know how to explain to Mom that Lucas and I couldn't get married, so I simply kept silent and sat down to eat dumplings. But after eating just two, I felt a rapid churning in my stomach. Without thinking much, I rushed to the bathroom and vomited. "What's wrong, my dear?" Mom and Lucas chased after me to the bathroom. Mom gently patted my back while looking for a cup to get me some water. Lucas handed me the water. I took a long time to recover and told Mom that I was okay. Maybe my stomach was upset because of the cold weather these days. Mom lovingly wiped my mouth and said, "You scared Mom to death. Mom thought you were pregnant. It's not nice to have a child without getting married." My breath caught. My period is always very regular, coming on the 20th of every month. Today is the 1st. I didn't dare to look up at Lucas's face. I pretended to be relaxed and said, "No, Mom. It's just a gastrointestinal flu." The next day, Lucas left early. I opened the pharmacy app and ordered an online delivery. All 3 pregnancy tests showed 2 lines. My ears buzzed, and my hands and feet turned cold. After coming out of the hospital, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Living with Lucas day and night, if I had an operation, he would surely notice. If I kept the baby, it would be an even bigger problem as time went by. I planned to send Mom back to the sanatorium tomorrow and then figure out how to deal with the remaining problems on my own. I was so lost in thought that I walked mechanically on the road until a harsh horn sound interrupted my train of thought. I was startled, and my legs went weak, causing me to sit down directly. The door of the driver's seat was opened, and a young man rushed over to help me. I'm sorry. Are you okay?" My first reaction when I fell was to cover my belly. The imagined sharp pain and bleeding didn't happen. I thought I was just too nervous. After all, it was just an embryo. It wasn't that fragile. After seeing the man's face clearly, we both exclaimed at the same time. "Luna? Gabriel?" Gabriel was my high school classmate. We had a good relationship in school. After not seeing each other for years, we happily went to have a meal together. He has always been an outgoing person. Through the steaming heat of the hot pot, we talked about our high school life and laughed heartily. "Luna, there were so many boys in our class who liked you back then. How are you doing now? Which cow dung did you end up with?" 2 images appeared in my mind, one of Lucas and the other of cow dung. Strangely, they overlapped in a harmonious way. After the meal, he offered to send me home. I saw a bunch of roses in his car and curiously asked if he was going to see his girlfriend. "Girlfriend? Don't mention it. Yesterday was New Year's Day. I thought I'd send a bunch of flowers to my goddess. A licking dog should have the self-awareness of a licking dog, right?" She did happily accept it at that time and then turned around and went back. I thought I'd smoked a cigarette before leaving since I drove all the way here. You wouldn't believe it. In just 5 minutes, she came out again and looked around. I was in her blind spot, and she didn't see me. She directly threw the flowers into the trash can. Gabriel sighed. I picked them back up. They cost hundreds of yuan. It would be a pity to throw them away, right? I expressed my sympathy for him and encouraged him that a persevering licking dog might get what he wants in the end. Gabriel laughed and told me to get lost, then casually put the flowers into my hands. "Don't dislike them. Consider it as a gift from the boys in our class." I really didn't mind. I had several beautiful vases at home, which would come in handy. When Gabriel dropped me off at the villa gate, Lucas had already returned. He was making a phone call in the yard. Hearing the sound of the car, he glanced at me and then turned around and went inside. Gabriel was stunned. Old classmate, your home is so luxurious? And your husband is so handsome? I didn't know how to explain, so I just gave a dry laugh and sent him away. When I entered the door, I was holding the roses, feeling a bit nervous. But then I thought, he's already married, and I haven't really done anything wrong. So I should be able to socialize, right? There's no reason for me to be like a widow for him. When I opened the door, a broken cup was lying quietly at the entrance. And there was Lucas, with a livid face. Mom was so scared that she sat motionless on the sofa. I took a deep breath and sent Mom back to her bedroom. As soon as her door was closed, the familiar feeling of my scalp being pulled came back. Just like a few months ago, Lucas grabbed my hair and dragged me back to the bedroom, then slammed the door shut. Immediately after, I was pushed against the door. Lucas's eyes were red, he smelled of alcohol, and his breathing was terrifyingly rapid. I was frightened and tried to resist him with my bag. A big hand directly snatched my bag and threw it aside. Lucas grabbed my neck and used his other hand to tear my clothes. I was terrified, and my voice was trembling. Lucas, you can't do this. His voice was hoarse and low. Luna, what right do you have to say this to me? You're just bought with my money. What are you pretending to be aloof for? I was speechless. Taking this opportunity, Lucas dragged me towards the bed. The bag he had thrown just now landed on the bed, and he saw the blood test report at a glance. Luna? I don't understand. Explain to me what this means. Lucas finally stopped going crazy, and his voice was obscure. I snatched it back and crumpled it up. It's nothing, just a blood test report. Luna, are you pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? He laughed almost maniacally, and then gently touched my belly. I was terrified, but what came out of my mouth was, "What's the use of telling you?" Lucas suddenly looked up and glared at me. I thought he was the father of the child after all, so I just decided to face the situation directly. You're married, you have a wife. This child can't be kept. I didn't see the need to tell you. Lucas, we're from two different worlds. The game is over, and you should go back to your life. I don't know what I did to make you hate me so much. But after all this time, I've been your mistress, working hard, enduring your beatings and scoldings. We should be even now. Besides, wasn't it you who was sorry for me? Lucas, what are you feeling wronged about? Mom will be discharged from the hospital next month. Then we'll leave on our own. Lucas, let's go our separate ways. After saying these words, I felt as if my life force had been drained. I was exhausted and started to pick up the things scattered on the bed. It took Lucas a while to react. You want to leave, right? And you don't want the child either? I wiped my tears and nodded. Hearing this, Lucas directly knocked the things on the bed to the ground, then pounced on me and started tearing my clothes again. His leg pinned my waist tightly, and he used another hand to choke my neck. I struggled desperately but couldn't move. Then I saw him turn on the bedroom monitor. During the physical struggle, my heart ached sharply, and my tears kept streaming down. I couldn't stop them. He got up, turned off the monitor, and when he saw my bag, he thought for 2 seconds, then took out my bank card and ID card from it. I've been too good to you, right? You've got guts now, right? If you want to leave, you won't get a single cent. And everyone will see your videos and photos. Luna, you want to live a good life? If this is the kind of life, can you still survive? What I can give you, I can also take back. You can leave only when I tell you to. I got up and walked in front of him, slapping him several times, each slap louder than the last. I said, you really disgust me. Lucas left. He said he would come back in 2 days to send Mom with me. Aria's birthday was coming up. I planned to have a Japanese meal she liked with her. I told Mom in the morning and then went out. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Aria and I had a great chat. But halfway through the meal, I received a voice message from Mom on my phone. I clicked it. Mom's voice was calm at first, but then it became confused, and there were sobs mixed in. She said she was so tired, she said she missed Dad, and she said she was sorry. I called her back, but no one answered after several attempts. A strong sense of unease suddenly welled up in my heart. I immediately rushed back with Arya. On the way, I kept dialing her phone. When I made the 20-second call, a police officer answered. I felt dizzy. A voice kept repeating in my mind, "This can't be true, right?" When I got out of the car, I almost knelt down. Arya helped me up. My teeth were chattering. My mom? My mom? The scene was already cordoned off. Mom was lying quietly on the ground, her face covered with a white cloth. Next to her stood a well-dressed middle-aged woman giving a statement. I walked towards her, but she refused to meet my eyes. After Mom was taken away, the police wouldn't let me go upstairs. But I managed to sneak in when no one was paying attention and locked the door behind me. I turned on the monitor to check what had happened at home in the morning. Shortly after I left, the doorbell rang. Mom opened the door, and a shrill voice of a middle-aged woman came. "Who are you? Why are you in my son-in-law's house?" Lucas didn't tell me he hired a nanny. Mom explained that Lucas was her daughter's boyfriend and showed a photo. In return, the woman launched a fierce accusation at Mom. The main words were nothing but shameless, mistress, bad at raising a daughter. If I hadn't passed by today, I wouldn't have known that Lucas was hiding you two here. How dare you? You're having an affair and even brought your own mother along. My mom's face twitched a few times, and her eyes gradually dimmed after seeing the marriage certificate photo on the woman's phone. She said, "I don't know what's going on. You'd better ask Lucas and them." After saying that, my mom went back to her room. The woman followed aggressively and slapped my mom, with even more unpleasant words coming out of her mouth. My mom was stunned for a moment by the slap. She locked the door, took out the family photo from her bag, and her expression gradually fell apart. "Dear husband, I've been so hard. Dear husband, do you miss us, mother and daughter? Dear husband, I'm sorry. I didn't educate our daughter well." My mom was crying and laughing at the same time. She took out her phone with a trembling hand and sent me the last voice message, then opened the window. Someone kept knocking on the door outside, but I felt the room was extremely quiet. There were unfinished sunflower seeds on the table. Mom usually loved cracking sunflower seeds. I found a bottle of wine, filled a glass for myself, picked up a handful of sunflower seeds, and ate them carefully. She was discussing with me just a few days ago about which tourist city we should settle in. When we went shopping last time, I saw a dress that would suit Mom very well. But then I thought the color was too light and easy to get dirty. I should have bought it for Mom at that time. Did Mom have enough to eat this morning? She didn't really like breakfast like sandwiches and milk. I should have bought her fried buns this morning. Has Dad picked Mom up? They haven't seen each other for years. They must be very happy. Everything would have been fine in just one more month. Why did I have to bring Mom here these few days? It's all my fault. It's been my fault from the beginning to the end. My phone kept popping up with call reminders. I picked it up and answered. "Luna, calm down. Luna, I'll be there right away. Luna, my marriage with her is fake. Let's not quarrel anymore, okay? Luna, be good, okay? We still have a child. Let's get married." Lucas kept repeating these words. I sighed. "Lucas, I don't have my mom and dad anymore. It's my fault, Lucas. This is retribution." I hung up the phone and remembered that when I was a child, my parents made a joking promise that I mustn't get married far away and should stay by their side. I wiped away my tears with a smile and walked to the open window. "Mom and Dad, I'm coming to be with you." Extra story: I was having a meal with my wife at that time. "You're really something. You're so quick. But if you want me to agree to a divorce, give me 3 percentage points." The speaker was my wife, Ms. Julian, a well-known lesbian in the Shanghai circle. 3 percentage points were still acceptable. I asked her to go with me to explain the situation of our fake marriage to Luna, and she agreed. "It has to be me. I could tell you two had something going on as soon as I saw you at the KTV. Without my help, how could she get jealous so easily?" I got very angry when I thought about her disappearing without a word back then. But after seeing her situation years later, I couldn't help but feel heartrending. When the police called, I thought it was a prank until the other side accurately reported Luna's physical characteristics and Andy's identity information. When I was almost home, there were a lot of people gathered around. I suddenly felt short of breath, always feeling that something bad was about to happen. The police told me that she had entered the house. The door was locked from the inside and couldn't be opened from the outside. I directly asked to break the door open. She finally answered my call. I confessed to her about my fake marriage and said I wanted to marry her. I pleaded with her. She only said 2 sentences to me: "Lucas, I don't have my mom and dad anymore. It's my fault, Lucas. This is my retribution." Her voice was very soft, and her sobs were also very soft. Like a stray kitten or puppy. She didn't seem to have heard what I said at all. The moment the phone was hung up, the crowd let out a scream. I looked up. She turned around and sat on the window. She seemed to see me, and her eyes stayed on me for a few seconds. Then she fell straight down in front of me. I was seriously ill. I stopped going to the company and seeing people. Every day, I locked myself in this haunted house where people had died. I don't know why we ended up like this, why she seemed to have a deep hatred for me. Clearly, she was the one who broke up unilaterally and disappeared without a word. And now she had been relying on me for a living. I thought she loved me. Otherwise, such a stubborn person would never have agreed to be my mistress. But if she loved me, how could she explain leaving 5 years ago? Later, her best friend Aria came once and brought me her personal belongings. "Lucas, I feel sorry for Luna. She wasted so many years on you and finally died because of you. If you don't know the truth, go and ask. Don't let her die and still be resented by you." It took me a day to finish reading her diary. I called my mom, and she thought for a long time before she remembered this matter. "Your uncle told me a long time ago. Her father committed a crime, and the leadership had been collecting evidence. What do you know? Our family can't get involved with the child of a convict. Their family has to pay a large sum of money. Besides, I used a fake WeChat account to talk to you, and you didn't even notice. You didn't like that girl that much either. The reason for our entanglement of love and hatred for so many years turned out to be this. Julian's mother was sentenced to 5 years for intimidating and threatening others' lives due to stimulation." I said, "Mom, take care of yourself." Then I hung up the phone. In the evening, I sat by the window where Luna left. In front of me was a bowl of small wontons that she had wrapped and frozen in the refrigerator before she died. The wrappers were thin, the fillings were generous, and the soup base was delicious. It was really good. I remembered the first time I saw Luna. During military training, the instructor misunderstood that she violated the discipline. She refused to admit it. Under the scorching sun, this girl ran around the playground again and again. Her face was red, and she was almost suffering from heat stroke, but she still refused to apologize to the instructor. When I saw her in the KTV a few years later, I was shocked and angry. I didn't know how she had spent these years. Every time I wanted to be nice to her, I would think of her leaving without saying goodbye 5 years ago and think of her singing and smiling for customers. Then I thought she deserved it. She should have suffered outside so that she would know who was good to her. I gulped down the wine, and my tears couldn't stop flowing. The kitchen hadn't been used for a long time, and there was a thin layer of dust. "This room is so cold. Does a house die after losing its human touch?" I remembered her busy figure in the kitchen. She was a good cook, and my stomach problems hadn't flared up for a long time. She was so afraid of pain. What kind of mood was she in when she left? She must have been really desperate. The wine in my mouth was bitter and spicy. It choked me, and I coughed up tears. How is she doing over there? She has her mom and dad who love her and no longer has to worry about making a living. How is our child? Does she miss dad? I swallowed the wontons in my mouth and stumbled to climb onto the window. "Luna, I'm coming to find you."